Guam, Lieutenant Governor of Guam, Dr. Ricky Hernandez, Deputy Executive Manager of the Guam International Airport Authority and the Economic Recovery Coordinator, as well as Dr. Felix Cabrera with the State Surgeon Cell and Physicians Advisory Group. And now to Governor Leon Guerrero for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Janella. Half a day. As we have always said in the very beginning, reopening Guam will be slow, gradual, and very deliberate. Every decision we have made so far is based on data we have and our ability to manage and respond to the threat of COVID-19. Collectively, we've had made some really good progress since the public health emergency was declared on March 14th. And I am confident in the measured approach we are taking and direction our island is heading. After consulting with my physician advisory group and the state surgeon cell, I am declaring that Guam will be in Pandemic Condition of Readiness 3, effective midnight, Monday, July 20th. Under PCOR 3, all businesses will be allowed to operate with the exception of senior citizen centers and organized sports, leagues, tournaments, and events, subject to all previously issued minimum requirements. Prior to reopening, businesses must submit a reopening plan to public health. In addition to reopening of more businesses, the social gathering limit will be increased from 25 to 50 people, and this limit will be applicable to outdoor gatherings. Dr. Ricky Hernandez is here to answer any questions regarding this declaration. As Public Health released this week upon declaration of PCOR 3, K through 12 schools and institutions of higher education are authorized to open up submission of a reopening plan to public health. Lieutenant Governor Josh Denori has been working collaboratively and very closely with the Guam Department of Education. My Physicians Advisory Group Subcommittee on Education and other stakeholders are on this process. In line with this declaration, we are also making changes to the quarantine testing and monitoring requirements for all travelers entering Guam, where we are continuing to ensure we base our decisions on risk. Dr. Felix Cabrera is here to discuss the details of the new quarantine procedure, which will be effective after midnight on Friday, July 24th. While this shift into PCOR 3 reflects the medical data we have been tracking, I must remind everyone that this emergency is far from over. As we continue to monitor our progress, I will be extending the public health emergency to August 29th. Remember, our goal is not to simply move from one PCOR to another. It is to reopen our economy in a way that protects both lives and livelihoods. To do so, we must continue 6 feet social distancing, wearing face masks even if we're just with friends and family, and practicing good personal hygiene. These actions may be simple and sound repetitive, but they have made a huge difference in our community's ability to mitigate the spread of COVID-19.
Lieutenant Governor Tenori, would you like to make some remarks?
I just want to thank the people of Guam for their patience and their understanding and for their understanding of this process. The governor has set out on a course to be very deliberate and structured in our reopening, and that has protected our island and has really protected the long-term economic interests of the island so that we can continue the recovery plans. The only thing I want to add is with regards to social events, and we're Pacific Islanders. We're people from Guam. We love to hug. We love to kiss our relatives. We're just very, very, very loving in our nature. But I have to say, please, if you love your family, please continue to practice the regulations and the social distancing guidelines, especially when you're going to funerals or places of worship. It's just a temporary period of time. We're almost done, but please continue to keep your safety. And the only last thing I wanted to ask, and just an update, I would say on homelessness, we continue our efforts. We are now sheltering 57 individuals at our shelter, including 5 children. There will be other shelters that will be opening over the weekend. to accommodate the additional unsheltered population that are out there. And with that, Governor.
We'll turn it over to Dr. Felix Cabrera for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Janella and Governor, Lieutenant Governor. So I just wanted to start out by just giving everybody a quick update on what our Guam's COVID-19 status is per data available as of July 17. So in terms of our 7-day average for daily new cases, we're sitting very well at 0.6. Our threshold of concern for that is 5. Test positivity rate is at 0.333%. With a threshold of 3, so well below that as well. And our daily hospitalization census 7-day average is 2.6. So what I'm going to focus on with this is actually going over the new risk-based quarantine and testing protocol for travelers entering Guam. And just a reminder for everyone that this is our current protocol that became effective on July 1st and is still currently effective. And as the governor had mentioned, that we'll be moving into a new protocol on July 24th. But I bring this slide up again because to focus on the fact that this protocol looks mainly at high-risk areas and defines them and then goes from there. In the new protocol, we'll be switching to looking at basically areas that are either low risk or not low risk. So the first question that comes up is, are you originating from a COVID-19 low risk area? And we'll start out here by saying if you're not from that area, then you will be required to have a negative PCR test 5 days prior to arrival in Guam. This differs from the last protocol where we were requiring 72 hours. So this will hopefully be easier for travelers. If you do not have this test done and the results, then you will be quarantined at a government facility. If you do have this test and it's negative, you will be allowed to quarantine at home. If your results are delayed for whatever reason and you did get the sample taken before arriving on Guam, you will still go to a government facility quarantine. But then once you get those results, whether it be 1 or 2 days or so after, then you can move over to quarantining at home. In this new protocol, equally both home and government, on the 7th day after arrival, you do have the opportunity to get another PCR test or maybe your first PCR test in this process. And if that is negative, then you will be allowed to early release from quarantine. In this process, you will still comply fully with the 14 days of symptom monitoring and tracking program. Of course, if that test ends up positive, then you will receive a clinical evaluation and continue isolation. If you either opt for not taking the test or the test is not available for whatever reason, because the test is subject to availability, and priority is given to those in government facility quarantine, you will complete the full 14-day quarantine. So what's new on this protocol also is the left side here. So if you are originating from a low-risk area, and a list of low-risk areas will be provided at a future date, but I will give a preview that, for example, these are areas around our region that are considered very low risk, typically risks that are below Guam. And so those are areas like the CNMI, Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, Marshall Islands, South Korea, and Taiwan, for example. If your stay is less than 5 nights, then at this point here, you won't require any testing coming into Guam. And then while you're at Guam, you will not be required to quarantine or test any further. And there is a reason behind the 5 nights, and that's based on risk. So if that's the case, and if you leave after that time period, then you would have been here on Guam without, again, the test or quarantine. Now, if your stay is more than 5 nights, then your risk level changes in a bit in terms of your the risk of spreading potentially new coronavirus to the people of Guam. So in that case, on the 5th day of you arriving on Guam, you will be required to take a PCR test. If by chance you happen to have a PCR test that was within 5 days before your arrival on Guam, even if it was from a low risk area, we will count that as well, and you will be not subject to take another test here. And of course, if that test is negative, then it continues, no quarantine or further testing required. But you will still have to continue to comply fully with the symptom monitoring and tracking for the duration of your stay for up to 14 days. And of course, if it's positive, then we will provide you clinical evaluation and isolation options. And that concludes the run through for this protocol. Again, this will be made available for everyone. It will be available on the DPHSS website, the protocol itself, and then the list of low risk areas as they are being generated. Also, I'll state that majority of the states are not within the low risk area classification, and that you're looking at about 15% of the listed states as part of that. But we will make that list available probably early next week. And from there, I'll hand it over. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Cabrera. We'll now open the floor to questions from the media, and we'll begin with the point. Oyal Niraregla.
Half a day, Governor. Half a day, everyone on the panel. Lieutenant Governor, how are you today? Sorry, can everybody hear me?
Yes, they didn't have their mics, but they said they're good.
Awesome. Thanks for that thumbs up, LT. So, Governor, with respect to the PUA, there's been a little over $200 million, I think, that has already been distributed amongst many of Guam's displaced employees. The question then becomes, has Gov Guam received assurances that the second batch of unemployment benefits or the funding for those unemployment benefits will be released soon? And do you know how much that is?
So if you recall, the first batch, I think, was about $274 million that was downloaded into the account. And I do know that the director of the Department of Labor, Dave Del Sola, has been in close communication with U.S. Treasury to download the second batch. They were approved for $974 million. So because they have been approved for that, what's going to happen is that they will be giving them the batches as we draw down on them. So yes, we are assured that it would be given.
Thank you, ma'am. And second question just kind of goes back to the directorships in the administration. Can you confirm, ma'am, that Joanne Camacho will be the GITA deputy, that the TAG will be handling Homeland Security? And if that is the case, the latter that is Tim Uggan resigning? And is he resigning due to any concerns over the quarantine facilities?
So to the question of former First Lady Joanne Camacho, yes, she is going to be the Deputy Director of GITA, and I think she's starting August 1st. And we are actually very excited to have her on board with our administration. She's, as you know, very much experienced in retail business, very much experience in business development. And when she was working at Duty Free, she was also at one point the GVB director. And so she has a lot of not just retail business, but business development. And both Melanie Mendiola, the director, myself and the Lieutenant Governor, very excited to have her on board. She's got some really great ideas. And if people know First Lady Joanne Camacho, she's a go-getter. She lights fire under people. And we're going to see some really good economic development moving forward. The issue, your information about Tim Uggan is totally wrong. He is detailed over to Veterans Administration because, as you know, former deputy of Veterans Affairs is running for Senator, Fred Bordalio. And to us, veterans is very important. And I did not want to have any internal operations interference or interruption. So Tim, being a veteran himself, I have asked him to help out the Veterans Administration. The TAG also, I hear in past administration, it's not uncommon that the Adjutant General be also detailed to Homeland Security on a temporary basis. So all of that you said about the QFAC is wrong.
Thank you, Oya. Next is KOAM Nestor Lecanto.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. If I could ask either Dr. Cabrera or Governor, why not test arriving passengers from low-risk areas? Could you elaborate on that?
Hi, Nestor. So your question, as I understand, is that why not test passengers coming from low-risk areas? And so in terms of the protocol that was placed up there, there is a pathway for those to be tested. And again, that was on a 5-day mark. And that 5 days is actually pretty important in terms of our understanding of coronavirus and the incubation period for persons who may be infected. And what it was a calculated risk overall in terms of when was the optimal date to test persons who come in from even from a low risk area, and it was that 5 days. So basically, it comes down to if you have if you caught the virus, let's say on the day that you were traveling and you came in here to Guam. And if you're here for less than 5 days, it's very unlikely that you will manifest symptoms or become infectious. And when you leave Guam, then that no longer becomes Guam's problem, which is the reality of that. But if you're staying here beyond 5 days, then that's when the test becomes more important, so that we keep your risk level at a point that we are comfortable with in terms of your risk to the people of Guam. So that's where it comes to. It was a very highly debated by a lot of different people who had very different viewpoints on it, and it was a consensus that was made by the physician advisory group with the input of Department of Public Health and Social Services as well, of course, with other community members, and of course with the direct input with the governor and lieutenant governor and her office. So we feel pretty comfortable with that. We think it's a pathway that will alleviate some of the burden for people who are coming from areas that is not higher risk than Guam right now, and we think that that's fair.
Okay. Yeah. No. I agree. I mean, there are, advocates on both sides. The critics will say that this is clearly an accommodation for tourism, and then the other side will say, well, we have two crises. One is the health crisis, and the second is the economic crisis, and this is a necessary move. I'm wondering, Governor, if you can expound on that.
So if you recall, Nestor, that really the low risk isn't just those areas where the tourists that we know will be coming from. You have your low risk areas also, such as New York, low risk areas such as, I think, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Connecticut. I think Maine is one of them. So it's really based on risk. It's based on the corona area risk scoring. And some of these would go in and out. So for example, Japan isn't really considered right now a low risk because of the score had gone up because of what they are experiencing with increase in coronavirus positive cases. So it's very fluid. And we are watching this on a regular basis. Dr. Cabrera gives us a update almost every day on these risk cases. So yes, people might say it's really more just tourism oriented. Of course, tourism is very important, Nestor, to our economic health. And although it's not a decision made based on tourism, it's a decision made based on risk. And it's a decision made to assure the people of Guam that we continue to try and balance out the health and safety of our community along with outside travelers coming in.
If I could just add one more thing on that. and that this is also an accommodation for especially travelers coming from the CNMI, for example, that are coming to Guam for their healthcare needs as well. And so this allows them a very fair way to access their health care needs here on Guam in a position that doesn't require them to have the extra burden of the quarantine and testing requirements. So it's good for health travel. It's good for business travel as well. So we're making accommodation for our brothers and sisters throughout the region as well. So I think that that's very fair.
Thank you, Nestor. Next is Mariana's Business Journal, Matthew Taitano. Hi, Matthew. We'll circle back to you when you're ready. We'll go to PDN next. Jasmine Weiss.
Can anyone maybe speak to how many test kits we have now and how much more are we expected to have?
So right now we have about, I think, 10,800 around there test kits, and we are continuously getting some through, I think, HHS and CDC. So right now our inventory, Jasmine, is 10,800 plus.
Thank you very much. And also to the new quarantine regulations that'll be effective on the 24th, does that mean that this day 10 option for testing won't be in effect starting that date?
That is correct. So those who are, sorry, excuse me. So those who are on the, who unfortunately arrived before the 24th, they are still in that risk category right now as we make the list. So they would still have to, adhere to the policy as it is right now that was effective on July 1st. But in the new one, yes, we have consolidated it to just a 7-day post-arrival testing day for both those who are in the government quarantine facility and those who are doing home/self quarantine.
Got it. So if I'm coming in on the 23rd, I still follow the policy that's in effect right now.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jasmine. Matthew Taitano, go ahead.
Sorry, I realized I had to unmute myself. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My first question is a two-parted question addressed to the governor and Dr. Hernandez. Are there continued plans to offer the tenants and partners discounts and reduced fees for the airlines or future incentives for airlines? And second part is, what are the contingency plans to furlough staff at the airport or increase revenue? And are there further grants that the airport can apply for?
Hafide. So to your first question, well, I'll talk to the second question. Regarding furloughs at the airport, we did receive a CARES Act grant for the airport in the amount of $20.7 million. And with those funds, it does require employee retention percentage. And so as it relates to furloughs at this time, we are considering budget cuts, and that is ongoing, and that has been ongoing since even before I jumped onto the airport. But in terms of furloughing, there isn't any discussions currently internally regarding that. But we are looking at every other opportunity outside of personnel services and personnel costs to reduce our spending through the end of the fiscal year. We're currently working on our fiscal year 21 budget. That's ongoing as well. Obviously, that will be effective October 1st. So we're undergoing that current process at the airport at this time. I'm sorry, can you repeat your first question?
Are there continued plans to offer the tenants and partners discounts and reduced fees for the airlines or future incentives for airlines?
Yeah, sure. A lot of our tenants have been requesting for those relief packages, and I think for the quarter prior to my arrival, those were offered by the former EM and the board as well. So those discussions continue to be ongoing. I think that we're taking a measured approach as it relates to these discounts or any waivers or deferral of any of the rental. Given the announcement today, we have a better outlook in terms of how we can manage and balance the priorities of the airport and our stakeholders. And so I think that's that measured approach that we're going to be taking is going to be collaborative with our airline partners, with our tenants, with our rental car companies, and so forth. So we're in discussions with them. They have been in close discussions even prior to my arrival at the airport, and so we're going to continue those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Matthew?
Yes, to the governor, I had a question. What was your response to GHRA and the Guam Women's Chamber concerning takeout alcoholic beverages sales? And if you did not agree, why not?
So I do support their request. In fact, we had researched it out to see if I could just do it as an executive order, but we found out that it has to go through legislation. So I think they're working with the oversight senators to create legislation to allow it. I think it's a way to, again, provide some economic stabilization to our businesses. So as long as there are rules and regulations that guide that and that regulate those takeout drinks, I support it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew. Guam Daily Post, John O'Connor.
Thank you, Governor. It appears that for schools to open, they would need to submit and gain approval of their reopening plans. But the Guam Department of Education, at least, has said that it has had some difficulty obtaining some needed safety supplies. How is your administration going to assist GDOE with getting supplies, and will that assistance be extended to private schools and charter schools as well?
So we are always on the lookout for making sure that all agencies have their required PPEs, as that's one way of preventing exposure and transmission. And certainly Department of Education is one of them. And I do know that they have some funding that they could use towards that. But the Lieutenant Governor, who's much more involved in the details of that, I'm sure is going to add some comments to your question.
Thank you, Governor. John, first, let me just say that the plans required for the schools to reopen need to be submitted, and it's really for the basis of publishing them so that parents and other stakeholders have access to the specific safety plans and operations plans for each school. But there is a default approval for those plans as long as, and they'll be spot checked to make sure that they meet the minimum requirements and the parameters that were issued by public health. Now, with regards to the PPP or the PPE, the DOE as state education agency has $42 million in equitable services funds, and the requirement for these funds to stabilize education includes purchasing PPE for all schools, inclusive of the charter schools and the private schools. So last week, the superintendent notified me of some of the issues and challenges that they've been having. They have an MOU with Defense Logistics Services, who they intended to purchase and provide the PPEs. It's unclear whether or not the entire order can be filled by them. So we have offered, and Civil Defense and our Surgeon Cell have engaged Department of Education to understand all the needs. There are a list of pre-qualified vendors that have certified PPEs that will be able to be used. We have that list, and we've offered our assistance to help them secure the PPE. So this actually has surfaced now as a very pressing issue, and we are monitoring this daily and ready to support. Only other thing I would say is, in addition to the education funds, we have also cleared a path with FEMA for PPEs to also be reimbursed. And so this additional funding source is meant to expand and perhaps make the availability of the PPEs much longer, for a longer period of time.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. So this next question is for the governor, perhaps to go a little bit off topic here, but Ifam Malawan Guahan has asked that Pika Paharan be reinstated to the CLTC. What is your response, Governor?
In communication with Pika Farhan, I had thanked her for her work, and I'm very grateful for her past work. However, it is of course my prerogative to appoint whoever I think would also contribute to the goodness of the CLTC. So our commissioners that are appointed are just as capable and just as competent commissioners to move forward CLT's mission and to make sure that we get the leases going as expeditiously as possible.
Thank you, John. Pacific Island Times, Johanna Salinas.
Half a day, everyone.
Hello, Johanna.
Hello. So my question is for Ricky. Okay, so some businesses that have their application rejected for the business assistance program, it was based on their April GRT filing, which was based on March sales. They were told they were not eligible because their sales did not show 25% of business interruption. So my question is, why is eligibility based on March revenue when most businesses shut down only in mid-March?
Sure. Thanks, Joanna, for the question. So before I left Gita, I know that you're talking about the pandemic assistance grant for business interruption. And the funding source for that is from the coronavirus relief funds, which is from the US Treasury based on the CARES Act. And the guidance from the US Treasury to provide these small business grants are based on business interruption. And so the way that we interpret it at my time at Gita, and this program is still ongoing, is that business interruption was if your April 2020 gross receipts was 25% less than the prior 12 months of gross receipts to indicate business interruption. So the threshold for eligibility for these grants and the guidance that was provided by the US Treasury was such that there had to be some business interruption, and the cost associated with that business interruption would be costs that would be reimbursable with the grant. And so it was at the time the grant program was started, that was the most recent month and the most affected month at the time. And so since then, since the grant has been ongoing and since there are still funds available, I believe the Administrator CEO, Melanie Mendiola, along with her team, had expanded that program. It used to be a cap of $1.5 million or less in annual or annualized gross receipts, but that has since been lifted. And the grant cap was also lifted as well. And so that grant cap was lifted from 30,000 up to 50,000. And so there have been, last I was told, there has been over 2,000 businesses at least that have applied. I don't have the most up-to-date numbers, but that's the main reason why business interruption was required, and that's the way it was defined at the time, because the program had started, and that was the most recent month of a full-blown impact of the pandemic on businesses.
Okay, thank you. I feel like maybe your mic's not on. So to be clear, will there be another opportunity for these businesses to file based on their business interruption in the following months through December?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing program, and so I think that at the Guam Economic Development Authority, I think the updating of that could be something. But if there is a business, as I understand the protocols, is that if there is a business that was denied based on that specific threshold, that requirement, then there is an appeal process for that. And so if a business can make its own case in terms of it was or it did experience business interruption, then I think that is being dealt with on a case-by-case basis. From my understanding, if you call the number at GITA, they will answer. And so if any business has any issues of when their check is coming in, and I don't mean to inundate them, but if there's questions about where their grant application is in the process, you call the number, email them. They're very quick to respond. And so I urge everyone, especially everyone that's been texting everyone at GITA, that there is no special treatment. You call the number and you'll be treated the same as everyone else. And so that's any updates you need, just give them a call. I think the number is 647-4338.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. Governor, would you like to make some closing remarks?
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. And also I'd like to thank the Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Felix Cabrera, and of course, Deputy Director for the airport, Dr. Ricky.
Sorry,
Hernandez.
Governor. There is one more person who would like to ask questions. Adriana Cotero, I apologize.
It's okay. Hi, Governor. Hi, everyone. So my first question is in regards to the reopening for schools. We know that the targeted date is August 11th, and you had mentioned that that's going to come without sports. So I was wondering what the determining factor would be to have interscholastic sports, and also in direct communications I've had with GDOE superintendent. He said some of the finer and more difficult details that they're working out with the government right now is also involving transportation. So if you can give us an update on what some of the guidelines will be in place for busing.
So as far as interscholastic sports, if it means organized events or organized, it is not yet at this point lifted. And again, the basis for that is congregate gathering. And so that's what DOE also is agreeing to, that they will not be doing interscholastic sports, organized interscholastic sports at this time.
And do you have any updates, sorry, for that first question, do you have any updates on transportation guidelines that would be in place for busing?
Yes,
Sorry,
so,
the Lieutenant Governor will address that.
So that's an active
okay.
issue, Adriana, and public work. I've been facilitating a lot of meetings between DOE, Public Works, and Public Health. And so, yes, there are still parameters to be issued. It really will be focused on occupancy of the buses. We understand that there's going to be a significant reduction in the occupancy of the buses, and criteria will be forthcoming.
Okay. For my second question, which Oya kind of touched on it in regards to the most recent changes in your administration, but since COVID has entered our borders, there's been quite a shuffling amongst directors, administrators, the cabinet as a whole, and this coming from resignations to retirements. And I think we can count on two hands now the various changes. But moving forward with those that you have sitting as heads, and whether in these positions temporarily or permanently, do you feel confident as we continue to reopen the island? And more so, do you feel confident with their leadership when we still have the much anticipated second wave that may hit in the coming months?
Absolutely. The people that we have detailed and the people that we have appointed are people that have been involved with the COVID-19 measures from the very beginning. So they have the historical information, they have the knowledge, skill, and the experience for whatever experience we have now with COVID-19. And so I feel very confident in their abilities to continue on with the work that they need to do and the work that they do for containing the coronavirus.
Thank you, Adriana. And now for some closing remarks from the governor.
I'll pick up from where I started. I also wanted to again, thank the community. And just the other day, I was talking to someone and saying how I am very grateful for our community's cooperation in doing the preventive directives and initiatives to contain coronavirus. I was listening to Governor Cuomo this morning talking about New York, and he was saying that he feels New York has about 98% compliance to the directives. I think we have more than that, and we can see that when we're out there. I would, though, like to make sure that you continue to use your mask, even if you are with friends and family. A lot of these positive COVID cases are as a result of household. So please, just don't assume that because you're with household that you may not get COVID contamination or infection. Be very cautious about that. We are here at PCOR 3. It's been now 4 months plus since we've started on this very dreadful, god-awful journey. And we have managed to contain our fatality rate to very minimal, fatality of 5. And that's been about maybe 88 to maybe 90 days since we've had our last fatality. We've been able to, as Dr. Cabrera showed, that we are 0.33% positivity rate, which in most people's and experts say that our coronavirus is very, very much contained. The other, I think, much more positive information and success is that we continue to go out there and we continue our activities. We've increased our activities, and even at the increase of the activities, we've managed to contain our coronavirus at that very low positivity rate. We are in PCOR 3. We will be in PCOR 3 on July 20th, midnight. And we got there with, like I said, hard struggles, hard decisions that had to be made, many criticisms and many suggestions, recommendations, advice, and so forth. And I am very appreciative with the decisions that have been made. I think the advice that I have gotten and the advice that this administration has gotten from our experts, not just here locally, but also federally, and the advice taken to make the hard decisions to protect our people, to save the lives of our people, has been good decisions. We have been on the right direction. We have been even much more advanced in terms of how we incorporate and how we strategize and how we are going forward with this COVID-19. We have gone forward with very, like I have said in the past, very slow, safe, methodical, strategic, and scientifically based actions. We will continue to do that. In PCOR 3, we will continue to monitor, we will continue to test, we will continue to track our metrics, and hopefully we'll go into PCOR 4, which means now there's vaccine and we'll be much, much safer in our community. And again, I just want to encourage our people to please, as we begin to even open more, let's continue to be cautious. Let's continue to be conservative. Let's continue to make sure that we protect the lives of our loved one, our vulnerable population, our friends and our family, and the community as a whole. Thank you. I just cannot overstate my gratefulness for your cooperation and for your working to make our community safe. Thank you, and Sidus Masik.